This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. About 15 games into the NBA regular season, and already some interesting stuff happening, juicy stuff to go along with this NBA season. And, you know, obviously everybody's eyes is all glazed on the new superpower or proposed superpower that's repping out of the Eastern Conference in the Brooklyn Nets. Sean and I will kind of give a little bit of our take on that, man. But as always, man, not one team is going to wind up running things in this NBA town. People need to pay attention to that team over there in La La Land. They don't look like they're stopping anytime soon. So let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. Were you as hyped and glossy-eyed watching the Brooklyn Nets do their thing when the trifecta was able to form like Voltron the other night?
Listen, I gotta say, I was one of the millions of people who tuned in. The NBA
millions, like The Rock. I'm sure The Rock was watching too.
Yeah, the league bragged about it. They said that was, I think, the most watched League Pass game of the year, or something like that. Like, they put out all kinds of statistics about that. And ironically, hey, it lived up to the hype to see those three guys and Cleveland snatching that win with the great play of Colin Sexton. So, hey, man, it was a great game. And we'll see what ends up happening with Brooklyn the rest of the way, because defense is definitely going to be where they need to hang their hats on.
Well, it's funny, Shaw, because to me, one of the most watched games also highlighted a couple of things in pure contrast. Is no one's ever going to argue about whether or not this Brooklyn Nets team is offensively potent. I think, to your point, the question is, can these guys collectively come together and be committed on the things that make them not so great, right? Now, we've seen Kevin Durant show that he has a propensity to play defense when he's committed to doing it, albeit I would say if you're the Brooklyn Nets, you have to be very mindful of that, because that means he will be putting himself in certain circumstances and situations, coming fresh off of the Achilles injuries that he's suffered over the last couple of seasons, that makes you feel like, should he exert himself in that kind of way? Whereas guys like Harden and Irving have always been a wild card in their commitment to playing defense. And if you are Steve Nash, how do you navigate through that? Whereas the Los Angeles Lakers on MLK earlier this week, you know, playing against the Golden State Warriors, look like a basketball team that if they stay focused through the season, they will be probably the best team suited championship-wise to play their way into the playoffs without anyone really stopping them. But again, a team like the Golden State Warriors proved that you hang around this team a little bit, put a little bit of pressure on them, and even they can probably surprise you. So that was what stood out to me, is that all of the hoopla about the best teams and things of that nature, I think when you watch some of these games, especially on primetime, that you hone in so much so on some of the weaknesses that were exploited by some of the lesser teams that played against the upper echelon teams that we are claiming for, you know, as far as the NBA goes.
Yeah, I mean, and nobody at this stage is a finished product. I think in some ways there's been some conversation on some other shows and throughout the NBA Twitterverse, if you will, that the Lakers maybe are coasting. They're still coasting with the best record in the NBA, or one of the best records in the NBA. But yeah, like this isn't a finished product. And even taking things back to Brooklyn a little bit, you know, just as we record today, they go out here and make another signing for the defensive side of the basketball with Norvell Pell. So a guy who played some time in Philly is a pretty athletic big man, shot blocker, and that's what they need to replace the loss of Jared Allen. So you're going to continue to see this, you know, as teams figure out themselves and kind of what their rotations ultimately need to be, but maybe even add some peripheral pieces because they want to try to make this run until, I guess this will be July, right? It's going to be a July NBA Finals at some point.
Totally, man. Totally. So a lot to get into, man. You know, as always, we appreciate everybody hopping on board with us and chiming in with the baseline. Much to discuss as far as some of the news and notes. So we're going to get into that in a couple of moments. But later on in the show, you know, how we do with our breakdown. Shaw and I, we did it earlier this year, and we're going to do it again. We play a little about that, doubt that. And, and it's been a while since my man Shaw helped whip this out for us, man. We're going to do a Who You Got So you got to stay tuned, man. My man, you know you want to find out who it is that we're going to put on either side of the pick'em on who you got. And it's just going to be a wild conversation to be had. So as always, be sure to get at my man Shaw, at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at Game Face Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. Just look for the Baseline. Add us to your playlist and allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things happening on the association. Tuesdays, 1 p.m. for our online radio listeners. Be sure to check out the Baseline NBA show via Nothing But Net on Dash Radio. So be sure to check us out there for our online listeners. And if you want to check out previous episodes of the Baseline, be sure to check out our podcast and go to our website, www.thebaselinenba.com. I promise you the content is pristine and we will not disappoint. So let's get right into some of the news and notes happening in the association, Shaw. Obviously, the big thing that stands out for the Portland Trailblazers, they lose out on their second best scorer, CJ McCollum, part of that dynamic duo who many have argued is probably the best backcourt in basketball with Dame Dollar and CJ McCollum. He is out with a fractured foot. How far does this set back the Portland Trailblazers?
Well, you couple that loss with the loss of Nurkic, who's also out for 2 months. And, Portland, you kind of say, well, this is why they got all that depth in the offseason, right? And but they'll have to lose 2 of your main guys in the starting lineup. It's one thing if you lose a rotation guy and a starter, but 2 of your main guys, and McCollum was actually outscoring Dame to begin the year. CJ was, I think, 5th or something like that in league scoring and was shooting a bunch of threes and just playing out of his damn mind, playing great basketball. So we'll see how the Portland team responds. Terry Stott's going to have a lot on his shoulders, but they're going to have to hang their hat on some defense here a little bit as well. And while Dame and Gary Trent and even the infamous Rodney Hood will have to try to pick up the slack a little bit. Even Carmelo Anthony may get a couple more touches.
I'm just really curious. Who do you think the Portland Trailblazers can be without when it really matters the most? CJ McCollum or Yusuf Nurkic?
Well, I mean, it's CJ simply because of the dynamic playmaking ability, the shooting, and just what he can do to kind of help Dame on the offensive side. Nurkic he's fine playing kind of I don't want to say not a glue guy role, but he's a rebounder, defender, a guy who can pass as well too. So they're somewhat equally as important. But I'm going to lean towards CJ in that simply because he's working the defenses out and gives Dame another option to be able to go out here and get his own shot when necessary as well too. Where Nurkic can't really do that same thing. So they're both important, but CJ means more to Dame in the long run because it's another guy that now you can't just load up on Dame. You have to pay attention when CJ's out there as well.
I agree with you 100%, but I'm going to come at it from a different angle. I think the loss of Yusuf Nurkic is more important to the Trailblazers, and here's my reason why. Number one, I think with CJ McCollum out, now that's a wake-up call for Dame Lillard to wake up and say, hey, do you mind if I try to squeeze into the MVP race, depending upon the length of time that CJ McCollum is going to be out and stuff like that. Because usually this is what happens. When Dame gets some space, when he gets a little bit of elbow room, he starts working it. And so now the Portland Trailblazers don't have a choice. They're going to have to do that. Where I feel like it's going to really impact losing Nurkic is this is just like the same old song. And I know if you're the Trailblazers and you're Trailblazers fans, you say to yourself, well, we're so used to him not being in the lineup and not being a intricate part through the course of a regular season. We just want him healthy for the playoffs, right? But that's the problem because you can't rely on this guy. And I think every single time we see that the Portland Trailblazers gets matched up with a team, say like the Clippers or the Lakers, you really can't tell whether or not they can stand toe-to-toe to those guys unless you actually see Nurkic on the floor and he is 100% healthy and doesn't have all of these lingering things that prevent us from being able to properly assess or evaluate the value that he brings to a team. It always comes down to CJ and Dame Lillard. So to me, the bigger loss is Nurkic because, again, the guy just never stays healthy. And if you really want to see whether or not the Portland Trailblazers, if you're Neil O'Shea, you really want to see what you're going to do with this basketball team, you got to know if whether or not your core players can stay healthy and stay ready to go blow to blows with the best of the best in the Western Conference. And that, to me, is just the bigger issue that I find when I think about Nurkic, is that he can never stay healthy enough for us to ever be able to truly evaluate that.
Well, it's sad because think about Nurkic. Think about Zach Collins, who's also has not been able to stay healthy and will probably end up finding his way out of Portland before really being able to contribute in that same way. So this team has struggled and battled injuries for the majority of the last 3 or 4 seasons, and still had a chance to go to the NBA Finals. You know, they made the Western Conference Finals a few seasons ago. So that's a credit to Dame and his play and his leadership. But if they could ever just stay healthy, you don't know what they could ultimately be.
Absolutely. All right. So now let's go ahead and talk about one of the bigger storylines through the course of the week. The Houston Rockets acquire Kevin Porter Jr. from the Cleveland Cavaliers, as if to say the Cleveland Cavaliers haven't gotten enough from from the Houston Rockets and the Brooklyn Nets and company and stuff like that. But we kind of saw the writing on the wall. Kevin Porter Jr.'s exodus from Cleveland, notwithstanding that there was any hesitation to this. I don't know where Kevin Porter Jr. was as far as the value to the franchise or whatever the case may be, but certainly the headache was definitely not worth what they had to deal with, and they just basically said, "Hey, we're done with you. We'll send you to Houston. Let Steven Silas deal with you."
Hey, I think for a protected second round pick, which you never hear like that. I mean, who's protecting second rounders? So they more or less just gave him for free. They're like, listen, we're done with this. And considering he slipped in the draft because of whatever issues he might have had in college as well too, and wherever he's going through right now, why he ended up having to get traded from Cleveland. I mean, it's an acceptable risk, especially at his dollar amount. And you just kind of figure it out. And if he's just no good for you, then you can do what the Cavs did. But you paid a second round pick that will probably never convey, and now you get a guy with talent to build around with Christian Wood and John Wall, and if you keep Oladipo, et cetera, et cetera. So I think Rafael Stone in Houston has done a great job here. I think second chances are what life is all about, and hopefully Kevin Porter Jr. can get his life back together here in Houston.
I'm curious though, with a coach like Steven Silas, how much latitude he's willing to give if the whole intent is to really evaluate the talent level that Kevin Porter could probably possess and where that fits. I often feel like sometimes it's such a slippery slope, usually with head coaches that are more concerned about seeing gradual success. Taking on a project like Kevin Porter Jr. in most cases doesn't help, but clearly, to your point, Shaw, Stone and Silas have to be comfortable with the idea of bringing a person like Kevin Porter Jr. and the baggage that he is carrying with him, albeit most of that baggage is probably coming from outside voices like his father, but we'll see how all that plays out. Out in Denver, Michael Porter Jr. returns back from COVID, and then another welcome return for Boston Celtics fans. Kemba Walker is come back from his injury. Who do you find is going to have instant impact on making their team instantly better, Porter Jr. or Kemba Walker? I shook you. I shook you with the guess 'em. I got you on a who you got already when we haven't even gotten to the real who you got.
Indeed, I'm going to take it from the aspect of just who's struggling the most right now, and it's Boston because they're dealing with all the COVID issues, and Tatum will be back, but presumably soon, but has been out, and they're starting to reel a little bit. So Kemba's return, while albeit on a minutes restriction, is probably more impactful for where Boston stands right now. Porter Jr. or Michael Porter rather, he means a lot to Denver's overall outlook, as does Kemba too. So don't get me wrong here. But if you're talking about the most immediate impact, I'm going to go with Kemba. And Michael Porter, again, he's been out for, it seems like, he played like 2 or 3 games, and then he's been in COVID protocol for like roughly 3 weeks. So I just know he's itching and rearing to get back out there for Denver. But I'm going to go with Kemba in terms of being more important at this stage.
I'm going to go with Kemba, but the reason why I'm going to go with Kemba is simply because I think if you are Danny Ainge, you really need to figure out what you're going to need in order to be able to hang with the rest of the big boys in the Eastern Conference, right? And that obviously means the Brooklyn Nets, the Philadelphia 76ers, because listen, we've said this so many times before. The Philadelphia 76ers normally play themselves. And maybe with them having Doc Rivers as their Yoda, okay, really, really kind of talking to them and showing them the force, okay? Maybe now we will see a different version of that tandem of Embiid and Simmons and how they can come up big come playoff time. But I think if you're the Boston Celtics, man, this is it, right? Like, If all you were doing is, all right, we need to wait and see when Kemba's come back from his injury and he's healthy, what this team is going to actually look like for us to do something, if we can do something, if we want to do something. It's better sooner than later. I just don't think that Danny Ainge can continue to keep playing this game where, all right, I did what I did in the preseason and it should be good enough, and you really don't do anything significant, knowing that all of the other teams that you're going to be dealing with in the Eastern Conference have done things stridently better as far as offseason acquisitions and trades and this, that, and the third. So to me, I think if you're Kemba, if you're the Celtics, you're happy that Kemba Walker is here now because you really need to evaluate what you're going to need to address by trade deadline time. And Danny Ainge cannot futz around with this, on a wish and a prayer, a wink and a prayer that the Kemba Walker experiment is going to be enough for the Celtics to put themselves back where they just were this past season, which was in the Eastern Conference Championship.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me, in that regard. And I think Brad Stevens does have a lot to figure out, and all reasons make sense. I just, with this COVID thing though, too, with guys going in and out, you also don't know what they're going to look like coming back. So I think for even going back to Michael Porter, it may take him a little bit more time to get up to speed, just catching his wind, because he's dealing with a serious health issue, while Kemba's dealing with a knee issue, which is serious as well too, but not in the same manner as COVID, where it's affecting, your breathing and, your respiratory stuff as well too. So it's just a wild season. And hopefully both guys come back and can contribute right away and make their teams better.
All right. And then finally, Shaw, the Olympics, word has it that the basketball team, the ability to have the Olympics basketball competition is rumored to be in trouble, and, rightfully so. I don't know why anyone thinks that this is something that's going to wind up taking place. I think when you consider the fact that the NBA has to plan for the contingency that because games are going to get postponed, that they're going to probably have to extend the season slightly in order to make up games lost and really to evaluate where the circumstances are by the end of the year to properly determine the length of time players are going to need in order to lay over for the next season following up. And you just got to wonder, is it really worth it to have Olympics competition just simply because it's been pushed a year, right? Because of the COVID situation. To me, the fact that it's rumored to be trouble is just BS. I think it's in trouble, period, because the season takes precedence. And no matter how long it takes, the NBA has obviously been about the resolve of getting the season completed. That will always be prioritized.
This isn't even the NBA's choice, though. At this point, it's Tokyo who's wants to cancel the whole thing. So, they're taking the COVID situation very seriously, as well they should. And that's what this conversation is really stemming from. So, if Tokyo cancels the Olympics, then there's just nothing for the NBA to be concerned about. But it is interesting, kind of to your point, that this rush and condensed time frame to play this season was so that guys could be ready to play in the Olympics as well, which I don't know, was probably a little bit, nearsighted, if you will, in some ways. Just I don't think the NBA was really thinking this through. Like, why would guys want to go through the season that they just went through with all the stuff that they've been dealing with and then try to go overseas and still in the midst of a pandemic? So I know. Anyway, Tokyo, I think, is handling it right, potentially. This is all rumor and conjecture at this point. But I do hope, everyone acts in the best interest of humanity and safety more than the aspect of sports.
Yeah, listen, man, I completely agree where you're coming from. And again, this is just one of those interesting scenarios where we want sports to happen so much. We want normalcy to happen so much, but it may be at an expense that's just too great a cost for the good of the game moving forward. So we'll see what happens. All right, Shaw. So good stuff all around. Coming up, we are going to get right down into it with the breakdown. Shaw and I got some really luscious stuff in our segment of About That, Doubt That, and then stay tuned, man. We got that Who You Got, man. We're not going to reveal the names just yet. We're gonna let this marinate a little bit. Let the head kind of swirl around and try to figure out who we gonna put on the docket to select on the Who You Got. So keep us here locked on the baseline.
Get ready for the brightest countdown of the year with the return of Zoo Lights at Zoo Miami. On select nights from November 27th through December 27th, the zoo will light up the night with over 1 million lights of all shapes and sizes. Visitors will also enjoy a new 26-foot tall holiday LED tree, after-hour animal encounters, hot chocolate, and cookies. Tickets must be purchased beforehand at shop.zoomiami.org.
Time to break it down. Time now for the breakdown. Cali, Warren Shaw, baseline, and got a lot of stuff to get into with the with our breakdown. Shaw, it's been too long. No, let me play. I mean, we can't do it fast enough. There's been a lot of fan favor of us doing our little segment called About That, Doubt That, and so let's bring it right back, baby. So. First things first, man, Shaw. Nikola Jokic will average a triple-double by season's end. Doubt that, or you about that?
I'm going to doubt that, and I think Jokic will be very close. It would be one hell of a feat if he did it, especially at the center position. Westbrook right now, I think, is not quite, well, he's averaging a triple-double or just short of a triple-double, I think, in terms of the rebounds. And when he gets back, and we could actually have two guys in the same season do it, well, that would really be something. But I think Jokic is just going to fall a little bit short. Denver's offense it's not that it's not running around him. It's just that it's starting to take on a little bit of difference. But we just talked about Michael Porter coming back. So if Porter comes back, that gives him another option to dime to. So it's possible, but I think for me, I'm going to say he's going to average maybe 9.4, something like that, and become very close to triple-double. Where are you on it, man? About that or doubt that?
I doubt that. I want to really be about that with Jokic, but I think the problem that I always have with Jokic is that he tends to lose steam as we get further into the season, which means certain parts to his game will kind of, deteriorate. And I guess I find it funny because Mike Malone to me strikes me as the kind of guy who doesn't innovate around the players. He kind of caters more to where the players are and tries to do more to keep players in a certain space, in a certain way that they can be effective and play effectively. Like maybe if, let's just say, for example, if Jokic was playing under, let's say he was playing under Budenholzer, right? Or maybe if he was playing under Doc Rivers, I would probably see a little bit more I will be more confident in believing that he can maintain or sustain that, or maybe even Scott Brooks. I could see him sustaining that, but with Malone, I don't see that. I see a very dependent-like type of coaching style. And you also have to keep in mind as well, too, offensively, to your point, the Denver Nuggets have not been as impressive to start with in this, for the season. And so I just think I'm expecting, their ups and downs. Clearly right now, the best part of the Denver Nuggets being where they are is because of the play of Jokic. It's just hard for me to see him sustaining that through the course of the rest of this season.
Yeah, I don't disagree. As I said, it's going to be close, though. He's a phenomenal talent, and I think he's off to his best start of his NBA career, and it's been a great career thus far. But we'll see. It would be fun if he did, and really, he's getting conversations about one of being the best big men in more recent times. But we have another center to talk about here, following Jokic too. So, but we both agree that we're going to doubt that Jokic can average a triple-double this year, but not by much.
All right, now Joel Embiid. I don't know whether you're trying to play with my emotions when you pose this one, Shaw. Joel Embiid will finish as a top 3 MVP candidate. Doubt that or about that?
I'm about that.
Oh my God. Oh my Lord. Oh, the floor is yours. Go ahead. Convince me.
I've given myself the wiggle room here because I said top 3. I didn't say he's going to win the MVP. He just got to finish in the top 3. So, it reminds me of, the J. Cole song where I think he samples George Bush. There's an old saying in Tennessee, fool me once, fool me, can't fool me again, or whatever it is, right? And I think I'm just riding the train with Joel Embiid right now. Fool me again, dog. I'm going to say he can finish as a top 3 MVP candidate. He's off to a great start. If you checked out our Friday 5, we had him in our top 3. He was in the 5, but he was one of the top 3 in the 5. And I definitely feel Embiid can keep this up as long as the Sixers and Ben Simmons and they can continue with this great spacing that they showed to begin the year. Hey, man, let's give it a shot. Let's ride the Embiid train one more.
Keep riding that train. And listen, if the Friday 5 is going to be, is going to elevate itself to that conversation of MVP status, that might be the best that Joel Embiid's going to see as far as being awarded, as far as I'm concerned. So clearly, I'm just telling to respectfully, Shaw, doubt that. So doubt that, right? So here's my thing. Did I not say that for the Philadelphia 76ers to be a championship-worthy basketball team, that Joel Embiid is going to have to play at an MVP level shot? When did I say that? Was it like 2-3 years ago? I said that. Yeah. He's still working on this, right? Now, granted, maybe Doc Rivers might actually get through to this dude. But you know what the problem is, Shaw? Giannis Antetokounmpo has won this thing twice already, right? Kevin Durant is back. James Harden is now in the Eastern Conference. Russell Westbrook is now in the Eastern Conference. Trae Young is playing, excellent basketball. Oh, and that doesn't even include the people that we said are probably favored to be considered for MVP candidacy, like Doncic, right? Lillard, right? And then, of course, LeBron James taking up MVP space. So to me, I'm not saying that you're not wrong in your ability to assess that Joel Embiid can possibly be. My problem is because of the restructuring of some teams of where players are, and because I am just exhausted in waiting to see Embiid be this kind of player consistently through an NBA season, I can't see that happening for him this year. Maybe he puts himself in that conversation by the end of the year that we're talking about it for him next year. But I don't have any confidence that he's going to finish being a top 3 MVP candidate simply because I think that there are too many other players. They're going to do a lot more for a lot longer than my expectations of what Embiid is going to have to do through the course of this regular season. Doesn't mean that it's not impressive what he's doing right now. I just don't think that he's going to sustain it. And he's never been the type to do it consistently for long stretches like some of the other players that we're considering in the MVP conversation.
He's got a long road to climb, and he's got a lot.
26-11 ain't bad to start with, bro. But if we talking MVP, my man gonna have to probably push that sucker up to 29, right? And maybe average closer to 12 if we're really, really talking about him in that kind. And maybe get somewhere close to 1.8 blocks per game. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm talking about when we're saying MVP, because we already have seen most of that from the guys that have already been selected over the last few years. And it's just, I'm not seeing where Embiid is going to put himself in that kind of conversation, especially if the Philadelphia 76ers have the ability to coast, right, through most of the season, beating all of the necessary teams and hanging around to be a top 3 team. It'll be interesting to see how far he separates himself from the rest of his quality teammates. More importantly, where he sits himself up next to the big dogs like Durant and Harden and those guys in the East.
Everything makes sense. Like you have to doubt where it is. It is an uphill climb. There's a lot of great talent out there. I'm just saying if Philly is a top 2 or 3 seed in the Eastern Conference and he's at, 25 plus and, 10 plus rebounds, a block or block and a half, whatever it is, he would have to be into consideration. Now, would that make him top 3 as opposed to maybe top 5? Maybe I'm pushing a little bit, but I'm going to give Embiid, the benefit of the doubt here. And like I said,
one more time. So you posed it for the clicks. You pushed it for the clicks. You want to say top 5 and play it safe. You're like, I will push for top 3. Let's see what shakes loose.
Hey, Cowspiracy like.
Yes. I see it's rubbing it off on you. It only took 3 years. All right, y'all. Buddy Hield will make more threes than Steph Curry and Dame Lillard. Is that combined or individually?
Individually. So, I mean,
I'm just, while we're feeling conspiracy-ish. So go ahead.
I mean, a lesser known fact, from, maybe less astute NBA guys, you're just looking at 3-point percentage and things of that nature. But Buddy Hield was second in 3-pointers made last year, actually behind James Harden. Granted, Curry didn't play. He only beat Lillard by 1. But at the same token, he's one of the most prolific 3-point shooters in the NBA. And that's what makes it kind of a touchy question. So we know Curry's out here doing his thing. The Kings are obviously not nearly as good as Golden State is, but this is what it's about. It's about, hey, who's going to launch them? Who's going to make them? And I think Hield is in this conversation, but when you throw him up against these names, you're just like, okay, it was Buddy Hield. He's not as good as Dame. He's not as good as Steph Curry. And that's true. But when it comes to just making 3-point shots, he's right up there. He's one of the best in the NBA. So while I posed the question to put it out there, I'm going to put it as a doubt that only because of even now with Dame specifically losing CJ. Well, Dame's going to be jacking like them shots is going up. So I think he's going to have a really hard time beating Dame, and obviously Curry's playing great basketball now as well too. I'm worried about Curry's his health, and just his durability throughout the course of the season with this load that he's taken on. So that also gives me some pause on the Curry side, but I don't know if he'll be able to beat both of them. What about you? So I doubt that.
I'm about that. But it's so funny the way I'm thinking about it again. There's just this quirky mindset that I got going on this week. So pardon me while I veer you off, you know what I'm saying, into Never Never Land in my thought process here. But here's the reason why I think Buddy Hield has a chance and may actually do this. Homie shoots, what is it? He shoots 37% from 2. Okay? He shoots 37% from 3. So what shot do you think he's going to be jacking up most nights? Right? He averages close to 11 3-point shots per game. And you just got to think, if the guy is shooting close to 40% from 3, that he's probably going to make more shots, from 3 than Steph Curry and probably from Damian Lillard. Now, if Damian Lillard and Steph Curry shoot that 3 ball with that kind of volume, then I'd probably say, okay, because we know who the more accurate shooters are going to be through the course of an NBA season. But I think that when you think about what Buddy Hield's being asked to do for Luke Walton, this is not about him scoring the most. This is about him making the most 3-point shots, right? And he gets that from facilitation from guys like Barnes and guys like De'Aaron Fox. So I think that he has the best opportunity to do so, whereas guys like Steph Curry and guys like Dame Lillard, while they're going to have to shoot the basketball, right, and have to be leaned on more to score for their team, it doesn't necessarily mean it's predicated on just them shooting, because everybody knows that that's what their strength is them shooting the basketball from 3. There may come a point, though, where they may have to actually shoot mid-range, distribute the basketball. More the onus is on those guys than I think the expectations are for Buddy Hield, which is why I am confident more so on Hield's propensity to probably make more threes than both of those guys, because the roles have changed, and the fact that Buddy Hield can't hit a damn 2-point shot for shit just gives me more encouragement that he'll probably have to shoot the 3 ball more if he expects to stay on the basketball court.
I think that's a solid argument, to be honest with you. And here's the thing. It's like, I think just what side of the basketball analytics do you rely on or do you believe in? It's like, would you rather be the point guard who has the ball in your hand and kind of making the decisions whether you're going to shoot it or pass it? Or would you be the guy that is constantly being set up on the corners and the wings and people are running pin downs and screens for you to get open shots, and you're consistently being looked to be set up, and your job is to just shoot it? And I think you can argue both sides, I think, equally. But I think your argument is very on point when it comes to Curry and Dame. They're more versatile scorers than Buddy Hield is. And Hield is, again, he's going to live and die by the 3 literally, while those other guys will kind of do a little bit of everything, especially driving and getting to the hoop and trying to get the free throw line as well.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our segment of the breakdown. Doing a little about that, doubt that, as we keep things moving along. Shaw, Bradley Beal will be traded before season's end. Doubt that, or you about that?
I doubt it. I want to be about it, but I just don't get a sense that Washington is ready to move. I feel like they want to check this thing out with Westbrook. The Thomas Bryant injury does play a little bit of a factor into how good they potentially be. That they just signed Alex Len as well too. We didn't put that in the news and notes, but it's Alex Len. So Washington is gonna be. They're going to try. That's all I can say. They're going to try, and I don't think they'll get to the deadline before they feel like they're out of. Like, they're not going to feel like they're out of it by the deadline. So we had them as at least to be a play-in team. I think they believe that as well. And while the record hasn't really shown that to be the case thus far, and now they've been ravaged by COVID, haven't played in roughly a week and a half, I think it is. I think they're going to keep Beal throughout the season, and then maybe deal him in the offseason. What about you?
I doubt that too. I really think that they want to see what happens when you have a combination of Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal on the basketball court, and really what Scott Brooks can do with this team. I don't know what it is about me. I always felt that maybe Scott Brooks has been given a raw deal. Do I think that he's one of the best coaches in the NBA? No, I don't. But I think that he's a good coach. And I think that he obviously had a good relationship with Russell Westbrook enough for the Washington Wizards to feel comfortable when they had to make that deal to bring him over, that they want to rekindle something. I think if you're Bradley Beal and you know that you're the man and Russell Westbrook just wants to be the show, that you play off of that. And you just go about the business of just making the Washington Wizards a better basketball team. I hope that they figure out a way to turn this around. I hope these guys can collaborate together because I think that they could be an exciting backcourt. It just sucks because it's being overshadowed, obviously, by the three-headed monster that's hanging around in Brooklyn. But I think that if the Washington Wizards can have some healthy pieces and maybe some moves that are actually sensibly made to help Scott Brooks put together a solid basketball team, that these guys might actually turn things around. I don't think it's going to happen this year, but I hope that they don't get an itchy trigger finger and have obviously brought Russell Westbrook over because they don't think that they're going to be able to keep Bradley Beal. So they got to figure, okay, well, we'll replace one quality player for another that we know is going to be able to put fans in the seats when they eventually, open things up again. I just think it's just absolutely asinine with that kind of thinking. I think there's some potential with that combination.
Yeah, me too. So let's hopefully Beal stays in DC, DC rise and all that, and we'll see what happens at the end of the season.
All right. Andre Drummond will finish the season as a Cleveland Cavalier. You about that or you doubt that?
I doubt that.
Woo! Talk to me now. Why do you doubt that?
I'm trying to speak it into existence more than anything else. You know what I mean?
So, okay. You just want to see all of that balling somewhere that could be appreciated on primetime TV, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, man. I'm on my LeVar Ball stuff to speak it into existence. I just feel like we talked about this, especially after the Brooklyn trade with Jared Allen there now. He's projects as their center of the future. And obviously then not that Dre's not good because he's still very good in putting up some monster statistics. But, hey, go.
Shaw, are you trying to say that this should have been the move that Danny Ainge made for the Boston Celtics?
I think Drummond fits in a lot of places. Honestly, Boston is one of them. Okay. But I just don't. I don't know with how they're playing and everything like that. If they'd want to do that, because then they also have. It's kind of like the Knicks thing with the point guards. Like Boston has a bunch of bigs. It's just, none of them are as good as Andre Drummond. But how do you make that move when you have all those other bigs on the roster? And you just got to try to carve out the playing time or deal one of them in some ways. And Cleveland doesn't want to take back another big in a deal. Mm-hmm. Something came out, ironically, we were just talking about DC and the Wizards. They were talking about that, maybe if there was a way to acquire him. But again, like I said, they just acquired Alex Len. Not that you wouldn't not get Drummond because you have Alex Len either. So I just feel like it's going to happen. They have too many bigs with Kevin Love, Larry Nance. We had JB Bickerstaff on the show. What was it earlier in late 2020? And, they talked a lot about how they love Larry Nance and want to see him grow and think he has more to offer. So he can't get those opportunities with both Love and Drummond still there. Now, Jared Allen, they might end up waiving JaVale McGee at some point as well, too. But Andre Drummond's got to go, bro. Like, send him somewhere else so he can try to maybe win an NBA championship or get his back, somewhere else as well, too. What about you? About that or doubt that he's going to get moved?
It's funny, man. I'm going to say about that, but I say it with I say it with a lot of trepidation, right?
So about that he'll stay.
I'm about that. I'm about the fact that he'll stay, right? Like, and so here's my thing. It's not because I believe that the Cleveland Cavaliers will do the right thing, right? Because to do the right thing is recognizing, number one, the Cleveland Cavaliers have won 7 games so far this year, right? So JB Bickerstaff has to be doing something right, okay? This is the best version that we've seen of Colin Sexton, Andre Drummond, Larry Nance. There's something there that you can at least be positive about. So then you say to yourself, well, if you move a player like Andre Drummond, what will that do to the morale of the basketball team? What will that do to the morale of the coach? Because he is obviously invested in seeing Andre Drummond become a successful basketball player. Drummond has been maligned, right, over the last few years. It's not that he's not been a good basketball player. He's been a great basketball player, but he's been maligned in Detroit. So now he's got a reset button here in Cleveland. It's curious to me where if Kobe Altman obviously moves Andre Drummond, right? In your head, you're thinking, well, he should do that. He has to do that, blah, 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 blah. But he could have done that with Kevin Love. Kevin Love has not seen the basketball court, right? And the guy's 32 years old. Whereas Drummond, 27, Sexton, 22, there's a young core there. If your thought process is that you're trying to rebuild. It's just interesting to me, Shaw, because I'm saying I believe that the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to find a way to F this up, okay? They're going to figure out a way. It's not going to be on Drummond. But what I'm saying is that if JB Bickerstaff is giving you this version of Andre Drummond, how you're confident about Joel Embiid being an MVP type of player, this is what I would have wanted to see from Joel Embiid, right? Like that. And he could do that in his sleep. And it basically takes Doc Rivers to find a way to do that to this dude finally. So this, again, man, I'm just like of the mindset, damn, if I love seeing this kind of Andre Drummond. If you send him somewhere else, I don't know if you're going to get that again. As much as I know you believe that he should probably be better off elsewhere. I just feel like this is a joy to watch a guy giving you 25 and 25, 30 and 30, or whatever the case may be, because JB Bickerstaff has found a way to get that out of this dude. And somehow, some way, it's going to get messed up. He's going to get sent somewhere else, and he'll probably not be that same type of player. And that's what I'm afraid of.
I understand the point. I just feel like, would you rather have Andre Drummond, getting 25 and 20 and 3 steals and 4 blocks? Like, he's putting up like sick cross the board stats.
Yeah.
Or, but on a at this point, a middling team, they're not a bad team. They like you said, JB's doing a good job over there. Or would you rather have him on a championship level team where he can, he's more doing 12 and maybe really focusing on rebounding the same way, and 15, 17 rebounds or whatever it is, and 2 blocks or whatever, but is not somebody you have to rely on, especially when it comes to in the fourth quarter. A guy can't shoot free throws, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think for at this stage of his career, he's going to want his money. He's still young. So he's going to want to go somewhere he can get paid, and putting up these monstrous stats is going to continue to get him paid. But I'd love to see him go somewhere and get a chip. Right now, like even what Clint Capella is doing in Atlanta, that experiment is working out extremely well. Capella's come on massively in the last, week or so. And I think Drummond can do stuff like that. You know what I mean? Where he's scoring in the teens, rebounding in the teens, and getting a bunch of blocks and really helping a team and bolster a defense.
But I think a lot of that as well, too, Shaw, is retooling, refining, and resetting the mind about where you truly can have an impact on the game, right? Like, I just feel like Bickerstaff is just that guy right now for him. Right? I'm not saying he's that guy for everyone. We had him on our show, and it was a great conversation, and you could just tell that he wants to see the best out of the players that he is vested in. And the rest of the guys that just are not on board, hey, he lets Altman deal with them. And my thing is that Altman may affect that dynamic if he chooses to move a guy that he now has playing at such a high level. It's just, again, it's not that we not want it, because we're of the media. We're going to talk about it. It's going to be, it's going to be at the forefront of why we're saying, oh, this was an important move, and we'll scrutinize what the Cleveland Cavaliers get back. But I'm just saying, look at what Sexton is doing, look what Drummond is doing, and look what the team is basically doing off of that. It'll be a shame if obviously, and we think we know it's probably going to happen. We know it's probably going to go that route. But damn. All right, Shaw. Miles Turner will continue his current pace of 4 blocks per game. About that or doubt that?
All right, it's kind of an easy one. I doubt it.
No confidence in MT, huh?
It's not that. It's just 4 blocks is stupid. it's a lot of. That's a lot of deterring shots. And I think he's still going to be one of the league's best and premier rim defenders and erasers out there. I think we'll see this number drop into the 3s somewhere, something like that too. It's just 4 is a lot to average. We'd have to go back to like the Manute Bowl days, I think it is, before somebody was averaging 4 blocks, for an entire season. So, but again, great defense is being played by Miles Turner, and Nate Bjorken has the Pacers playing great basketball, even after the Oladipo trade and everything like that. Like, hey, they're making things work out there, and Turner's a big part of it, especially defensively.
I'm going to say about that, right? Like, so right now, Turner is averaging around 31, close to 32 minutes per game.
Mhm.
I would look. Remember when Hassan Whiteside came onto the scene? He came on like gangbusters, and I think maybe then we would have probably been throwing that out and said, "Nah, that's not realistic," because I just don't think that we didn't think that Hassan Whiteside had that mindset, right? Like he was just so feeling himself. I think with Miles Turner, I think that he is accidentally stumbling himself into having a great defensive season. So great that I think once the word starts kind of, moving around the campfire, yo, bro, you could be positioning yourself to defensive player in the year. I think he's going to have a much more concerted effort of him investing his energy and time to be playing about as top level defense as you could probably ask for from this guy, which we thought was something that should have came naturally from when he came out of college. But I think that he's been so offensively focused that he just completely got away from his natural ability to do what he's been able to do, which is defend pretty damn well and be able to block shots. I think he's capable of doing it. Will it be unprecedented? Absolutely. But for me, I think this is the only way Miles Turner remains relevant in the bigger scheme of things from a money perspective and also from a player perspective. I think he sold himself short as far as living up to the expectations of what he could do for teams offensively. I think his way to go is do it defensively. He's always been hanging around that number. I think that he could probably hold his own just as long as he doesn't have that Hassan Whiteside syndrome in him.
What you said is very eloquent, and you wax poetically, I think.
Well, you know me, Shaw. I'm a former rhymer in my day, so I wax them. I wax them poetics. You know what I'm saying? Quite nicely when I absolutely need to.
And there was no doubt, Turner has taken all the crap in the offseason about potentially being moved and that Gordon Hayward deal that would have landed him in Boston and maybe flipped again, according to Danny Ainge, who didn't really want him per se. So to know that his name has been brought up and things of that nature, and now you're seeing guys like Sabonis and even Brogdon are really taking charge offensively. Turner's like, all right, well, here's what I'm good at and here's what I'm going to focus on. And to his credit, he has not pouted. But 4 blocks is lofty. It hasn't been done. I had to look it up since 95-96, where Dikembe Mutombo averaged 4.49 blocks a game. The last guy to even average 3 was Whiteside a few years ago when he averaged 3.6. So it's a lot to average 4. It's a lot to even average 3. So that's why I doubt that at that number. But I still think he's probably going to project as the shot blocking leader this season. And then also as a guy who's going to be one of the top rim defenders just in general in terms of the overall analytics, not the counting stance of blocks, just, when he's defending the rim, how many points are actually being scored in the paint against him. And that's still something that you can hang your hat on if you're Indiana and if you're Miles Turner.
Absolutely, man. So good stuff all around. You know what I'm saying? My man Shaw always is about that. Never doubt that. And hey, listen, just so you know, I got a new nickname for Buddy Hield. Since we now have entered him into the about that, doubt that fray. Buddy, no yield healed, if he's going to be making them kind of threes. So you might be hearing me throw that name out quite often. Buddy, no yield healed. All right. Coming up, Shaw and I will be doing our thing on Who You Got. And yes, I'm still not telling you the names, but you will find out once you stay with us here on The Baseline.
New Extra Charge Hot and Iced Coffee from Dunkin' is made with 20% extra caffeine from green coffee extract, because we could all use a little extra this year. Whether that's an extra boost, some extra boldness, or the drive to go the extra mile, we're extra ready for whatever comes our way and extra excited to take it on. Let's get it done with a medium extra charged coffee from Dunkin' for $2 with 20% more caffeine. And pair it with snackable stuffed bagel minis for an added all-day boost. Order ahead on the Dunkin' app. America runs on Dunkin'. Participation may vary. Limited time offer.
This is The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as we continue with the breakdown and Who You Got. I know y'all been just shaking and waiting in anticipation. Who are the 2 people that we are going to drop on the docket for Who You Got? Well, I don't know why you guys should be surprised. It isn't like these guys didn't face off against each other in the first round of the NBA playoffs in the bubble last season, right? Like, of course, if we're going to do a Who You Got, it's got to be about Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell, right? So blame Shaw for that, by the way. He's the one who was the mastermind of such deviousness. So Shaw, since you're the devious one who concocted this crazy-ass scheme of us having to choose between Jamal Murray, right, the cantankerous Canadian, and the Spider, Donovan Mitchell. Who you got?
I love both of these guys. And I
Talk
feel
about
like
waxing poetics already. Here we go. You're getting in your Stephen A. I'd love these guys. I don't mean no disrespect.
and I don't. We're not here like Shaq, trying to try Donovan Mitchell after he drops 36 and 7 or whatever the hell it was. Like, well, I don't think he's good enough to be, a superstar guy and all that shit. So, that was a weird segment. Anyway, I digress. Here's the thing. You look at statistically, especially over the course of their careers and even what's going on right now, Donovan Mitchell is whooping Jamal's ass, right? I think what we're looking at this is in terms of what we saw in the bubble and who would you rather have just in general, especially when it comes to crunch time. So we got to see Jamal do it longer because the Nuggets ended up being in Donovan's team and then ended up going all the way to the Western Conference Final. So it puts him into this conversation. Is he this super clutch guy that you ultimately want to have in the playoffs? And the one thing here, and I'm going to get to my point where the one thing we haven't seen is Jamal Murray truly without Nikola Jokic. So think about what Murray's numbers could potentially be if he didn't have a Jokic. If he had a Rudy Gobert, who was more defensive minded and wasn't an offensive genius like Jokic is in terms of even passing and rebounding and scoring. If he had like Donovan Mitchell's roster and was playing with Rudy Gobert, well, Jamal Murray would be putting up more shots and probably scoring more points and having to do a little bit more. Where Murray isn't the guy, Donovan Mitchell is the guy in Utah. And I think that's where the question, while the stats lend towards Mitchell's favor very, very favorably, that's why it's an accurate question. So for me, I say all of that to say I still would probably take Donovan Mitchell.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There's something about him, I think, that I just really like as a dude. You know what I mean? Just as a human being, kind of what he brings. Not that Jamal Murray's a bad guy. I just get a better and truer sense of leadership. And maybe it is because of the role in Utah, et cetera, about Donovan than I do with Jamal. And because even with that, we're seeing more from Mitchell on a regular basis. I don't want to hold the fact that he's standing out and he has a Rudy Gobert alongside him instead of a Nikola Jokic alongside him. I feel Donovan would still be getting his, even if Jokic was on his team. I feel like we'd still see very close to these numbers and these averages where Jamal has shrunk at times and, just doesn't really, is not as aggressive or just isn't on, in certain cases as well too. So for the who you got, I'd actually still take Donovan Mitchell, but it's not an open and shut case as I think many of our listeners may look at it, especially when we post our social media graphics about, well, this is easy, this is dumb. I need them to listen and really kind of dig in and think about, why the case for Jamal Murray should be a little bit more deep.
So the question, when we normally ask who you got, it's often predicated on if you're starting a franchise, which of the two players would you select, right? And it's interesting, Shaw, because I never, ever really put Jamal Murray on my radar. I know as much as the hype was about him coming out of Kentucky, of how dynamic a player he is. The one thing that I think often stands out with me when I think about Jamal Murray is the fact that he's a player. He's never struck me as a guy who will come out to lead, right? Now, I'm not saying that to say that he's not capable, because he clearly is helping his basketball team. I just think he does it in a different way. And when I think of Donovan Mitchell, he is the most erratic, eccentric, lively basketball player I think I've ever seen, okay? If you ever watch Donovan Mitchell play, his eyes be bugging. My man look like he's like, seriously, like he's like a serial killer that's dressed up on a basketball jersey. But sometimes that's exactly what you need, right? Especially playing out in Utah, okay? You just got to look like you're crazy enough that you're willing to do anything, right? The thing I think that just really stands out about Donovan Mitchell in my regards to say that he is a notch better than Jamal Murray is the fact that he came into a situation where he recognized that he needed to be the man, not just by scoring, but by just being of a different element, being of a different ilk, playing in Utah, Whereas Jamal Murray, he had excitement, but none of it had really translated until he actually worked with Mike Malone, right? And I think part of that is that we're now seeing what Jamal Murray is capable of. Jamal Murray can inspire you. Jamal Murray is the type of person where he can set a standard of elevated basketball that you feel like, damn, I want to watch this guy play. But Donovan Mitchell is the kind of dude that it looks like everything that he does on the court, he takes it personal. He takes it personal that Jamal Murray bested him in that series. He takes it personal that the Denver Nuggets wound up going to the Western Conference Finals and his team has yet to sniff that, that achievement. It's like that's the kind of mantra mentality that you want when you're building a franchise, because he's still giving you 22.8 points per game. But then he realizes that there's some other things that he needs to do to better himself. And you can see that in him. Play better defense. Be more accountable. Hey, the situation with him and Rudy Gobert, he isn't the type of guy to say, I want that guy gone. He's the kind of guy to say, all right, you still on this team? We need to work together to be the third best team again in the Western Conference. So to me, these are the intangibles that I just consistently see from Donovan Mitchell on a night in, night out basis. It's not to say that Jamal Murray isn't of that. It's just that it comes off in a different way. It's more of like a slow uptick. It's gradually getting there. I don't know where it'll peak at. I don't know where it'll wind up being. But I think part of it is being masqueraded by him leaning on Malone and on Jokic. And until I see Jamal Murray just break out of his shell and really say, I am the man on this team. This team has to go through me, not through Jokic, is the only time that I'm saying for the argument that we're having right now about who I want to start a franchise with is when I will say Jamal Murray will best Donovan Mitchell in that regard.
Right. Jamal, we've seen the bubble. That's what he's known for. And we've all kind of got swept up in that. I think even I did. And I think in that series, at one point, he was outplaying Jokic. He's not the best player on the Denver Nuggets. Like, that's not even remotely the case.
But do you ever feel like when you watch Jamal Murray play, Shaw, that like you're still waiting for something from that dude? Like, I don't need to wait about anything with Donovan Mitchell. It's either he's got it tonight or he ain't got it, right? But you'll never question where he is on that. Like, he's going to keep giving it, even if what he's given is not good enough to help his team win. Everybody knows that for them to win, he's got to keep giving it and giving it more. Whereas with Murray, you just never get the sense that you're just kind of lazing around, waiting. And again, it has nothing to do with the capacity for his ability to score, the capacity for him to excite and take over games and give dynamic performances. It just feels like, all right, it's coming. It's coming. It's like watching a series, right? In the first few episodes, you watching the series, you're like, they're building the characters. Be like, all right, man, if this don't build up after the second show, if this don't build up, man, I'm moving on to the next series. That's where you kind of feel like sometimes with Jamal Murray.
Yeah, I feel like I don't even know if I'm waiting. If Jamal Murray doesn't play well for Denver, it's kind of like, okay, yeah. But if Donovan Mitchell doesn't play well for Utah, it's like, oh, what the hell happens? What happened out there? And yeah, he has. I mean, they have some weapons out there in Utah too. Like Jordan Clarkson is a great weapon off the bench, and again, your boy Bogdanovich and even Ingles, when he's on, like I said, they find ways to score, and obviously with Mike Conley as well too. But it's just different, for Utah, and that's just the weight and the gravity that Donovan Mitchell has as a member of the Utah Jazz. Like he's carrying himself basically since Game 5, when he came into the scene as a rookie, as a leader and somebody who they need to rely on. And in Denver, it's kind of like, all right, well, did Jamal give it to us tonight? All right, not so much. All right, cool. And maybe it's this, the age question that I've said here 1,000 times on the show now is like, all right, well, if he's just this massive playoff performer, he might still be worth the contract. Right, like if he can get you to the conference finals or the NBA finals and go crazy ham in the playoffs, then cool. But in terms of like who I want on a night in, night out basis, that's still going to be Donovan, simply because, you like you said, you feel that effort there kind of on a regular basis with him, even if he doesn't have it. Nakai has said something on his podcast, great podcast with Steve Jones that they have out there right now. I think it's called The Dunker Spot. He said he just wishes Donovan Mitchell was 10% better at everything. I mean, and that's a hell of a statement. If he was 10% better at everything he does,
do you know who? Do you know who?
What Jack is talking about?
Do you know who Donovan Mitchell really reminds me of? Except you can tell that he really, really wants to be a great basketball player. Like he wants to be respected, right? That's to me like he reminds me of Drew Holiday, right? Like Drew Holiday when he came into the NBA, you know what I'm saying? Rookie of the year, this, that, and the third. He's like a 5-tool basketball player, bro. Could shoot, could defend, you know what I'm saying? Can get to the rack. Like he had everything. The problem is like he dummied down some of the stuff that always made him great because he felt like he had to be great at everything. And I will say as well, too, that the coaches that he played for did not set him up for success. Now, I don't know where Quinn Snyder falls on this with regards to Donovan Mitchell. I'm just saying from Jump Street, Donovan Mitchell looks like the kind of player, comes off as the kind of player that it's not going to be the coach that's going to determine his level of greatness. It's going to be Donovan Mitchell. And I think that might be the caveat in seeing him ascend a lot higher with a lot more respect, having a more reputable, recognized game than I think we had to wait for with reference to Drew Holiday. And to me, that speaks volumes because it means at some point, either the Utah Jazz are going to do something to put him in the best position so that the game stands out and is elevated in that way, or Donovan Mitchell is going to go somewhere and show that to you when his days with the Utah Jazz are long gone.
Yeah, I mean, well said. And I don't think you can go wrong with either one of these guys, really. But there's a clear-cut leader in the clubhouse, but I don't want to disrespect Jamal Murray. Like, we had to present a case.
No, there isn't. No, there isn't. And this is actually, Shaw, I will tell you this. If you had asked this question a year before, right, I'd have been like, no brainer, Donovan Mitchell. But Jamal Murray has shown us something to at least put into the conversation, to put it in its proper perspective, that he has the potential, he has the capacity to be able to do this. Now, I don't know if Shaq believes in that a whole lot more than he would have believed us saying, what were you thinking when you said that Donovan Mitchell ain't that kind of player, ain't that kind of dude? But I'm just saying, the only reason why he's saying that is because the Utah Jazz has disappointed. They've not stepped up and won games in the playoffs, so they always fall short. But you extract that from what you see from the performances that Donovan Mitchell gives you, and I think it's a completely different conversation to be had about whether or not we see greatness in this guy and you're capable of having and building around a dude like Donovan Mitchell. I just think that there's no question here. I think what has been elevated to now from not questionable to something of, hey, we'd be our best to look at this a little bit more carefully is Jamal Murray's capacity to be that kind of guy.
You know what's funny? You said a year ago, if we would have did this who you got right after the bubble, after Denver's run, there probably would have been a lot of people would have been caught up in the recency bias and picked Jamal Murray.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So timing is everything. Ironically, I didn't really mean to do this because actually, you'll know this, but we've been pondering this who you got for a little while. But Donovan Mitchell now is on an insane stretch, and he'll probably be Western Conference Player of the Week. So he's doing the damn thing right now. So recency bias is really going to have people leaning his way. I just don't think it's indicative or an indictment on Jamal Murray, who just needs to work on his consistency and maybe even being a little bit more aggressive on a regular basis on that Denver team. All
right, man. Woo! Hell of a show today, man. Some good topics to be bandied about on our social media platforms and everything, man. And we want to definitely hear from you. I know from our core listeners, but for our new listeners, hop on in, man. Don't be shy. The water is really nice when we start doing things like this. Who would you take? Would you take Jamal Murray, Team Murray, or would you take Team Mitchell, right? The cantankerous Canadian or the Spider? You tell me.
Spider.
Along came the Spider.
Right. And they both got like kind of superheroish nicknames. Jamal Murray is Blue Arrow. So
yeah.
I mean, you got Blue Arrow versus Spider. We'll see what the fans listeners have to think about this. I mean, we kind of know which way they're going to lean, but hey, maybe we'll be surprised.
Absolutely. So be sure to get at us at NBA Baseline. Once again, my man Shaw and I, we appreciate you guys for hopping on board with us. Again, if you want to catch this and other episodes, be sure to check out the Baseline NBA podcast. Go to www.tnba.com shop.thebaselinenba.com. For The Baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you folks. You know we do, and we'll catch up with you next time.